Welcome our viewers. My name is Kondere. I talk about all issues related to stress and anxiety. And today I have my guest, Devin Schubert. He's got a great testimony and he's a great leader. And I thought he would be of great value to our listeners today. David, Devin, kindly uh, talk to us. Tell us about your testimony. Tell us about your journey and what you do.
Yeah,
Welcome.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be able to share what the Lord has done in and through me, through the greatest of times, through the hardest of times, and through what he wants to continue to do through all of us. And so this is just a great opportunity to be able to reveal that Revelation 12:11 of where it is the power of the testimony of Jesus in and through us that we get to impact and transform other people's lives. And so for me, it started off growing up in a church Christian home and got saved at a young age, got married and started planting churches. I planted 7 churches, 9 ministries. I was a social worker for the state of Iowa. I traveled teaching trauma and abuse, and then adopted 3 children, adopted 2 boys from foster care, and also started a foster care system in the churches, because one of the things that we struggle with is the world is taking care of what the church is supposed to. And so we started that, got that legalized. And after I helped plant, I think it was the 3rd church. I was off on a trip with the teenagers, and I came home and found my wife at the time with her boss, and it was just devastating for me. I called my pastor and we worked through a number of different things. She ended up not wanting to reconcile the relationship. She wanted to further what she was doing in her life as well as in her workplace, and so she chose to walk away from us. And through that, it really just sent me on a downward spiral of I lost my job. She ended up taking pretty much everything, all the finances, everything except for the empty house that I was now living in with my children. And it was through some very, very hard times during that. But the Lord really opened up my eyes during that time to realize that I needed to find a deeper intimacy with him as the Father and what that really looked like. And it took me on this long journey. And for 5 years then, I dove into what this intimacy with the Father looked like. I built up another church, built up another ministry, started a couple businesses, and then my world came crashing down again when one of my sons started to have some mental health, some trauma, some prior abuse issues that were really triggering to him. And I ended up taking him on one-on-one. My other kids went to go live with my ex-wife, and it got so bad that pretty much every day the police were called for physical restraints. There was different types of sexual issues that he was going through. And the doctors were telling me that, if you don't get help, you're not going to make it through this. And I can tell you 5 years later, that came to be true, to where I was completely shut down. I ended up in the hospital and was given 3 months left to live because it was called trauma shock. And so my brain and my body had completely disconnected, and I became basically a vegetable. And for 3 months, I was on 18 out of 24 hours bed rest. And during that time, my son went to go to a shelter, ended up getting him some help. But the Lord visited me and said, Devin, this is an opportunity for you to come home or to be able to stay here. But you have an assignment to continue moving forward, to lead leaders and to bring healing to a generation. And so I stepped into that, and the Lord miraculously healed me after the 3 months. And the rest was continuing to step into a calling that God had called me to. And when you're obedient and making those hard yeses, it's been a long journey over the last year and a half of recovering and then stepping into a calling that he has called. But here I am, alive and well and moving forward each and every day.
Yes. Oh my God, your testimony is very touching. It's many people might not get out of that, but because I think because of your background as a Christian, that really helped you to come out of this, to recover. I would assume other people probably end up alcoholic or things like that, or probably commit suicide. I mean, that is very, very, very painful, David. You talked about infidelity and the traumatic situation you went through. Would that be complex post-traumatic stress disorder that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I was actually diagnosed twice with the CPTSD. Once with when my wife went through the affair, and then when my son, when my brain shut down, I was diagnosed with it both times. Yeah.
Okay. What were the symptoms? What did you go through exactly? How did you feel? Would you like to share with somebody out there who's listening?
Yeah, so a lot of times when you're going through trauma is explained in a physical realm that it's the experience and the emotions trapped inside of your body. So a lot of times you will have complete brain fog to where it's like your brain will not seem to function. You can't think clearly. You can't see very well. So for myself, I began to shake very uncontrollably at certain times, to where the anxiety and that trauma would continue to we'll use the word manifest, but shake in my muscles to where I couldn't function.
Mm,
And as well, I became so hyper vigilant. I became
mm,
so aware of everything around me at all times, because it was a safety thing. And so we jump into, is it the flight, is it the fight, is it the freeze, is it the fawn, all these
mm,
different areas. And for me, it was, I just got to be ready for whatever comes.
mm, mm, mm. So how was your grieving process? How did you grieve? How did you grieve the loss of your marriage? And how did you start recovering and getting out of it?
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you
it's
marriage at all? Did you? Mm,
yeah. So I mean, that's a great question, because for me, I was still a pastor. I was still a social worker during the time, and as a leader, a lot of the leadership didn't know what to do with me, because I was a leader. And so what do you do with somebody who's in a high influential area?
mm,
And so I ended up, we appointed an elder to walk alongside of me through the affair and through the divorce, just to make sure that I was following the biblical standards to be able to go through. And none of the people had ever been through a divorce, had never been through an affair. And that was really hard for me, because I felt like they listened and they were great at listening, but nobody could really empathize as a leader what that looked like. And then you throw in 3 adopted children on top of that are now re-traumatized of not having their home together just
mm,
like it was before. It just added a complexity of loneliness to such a high level that it was so difficult to be able to go through by myself, but even having people alongside of me. And there was also just the stigma of I'm divorced, of
mm,
I'm not good enough, of who's ever going to love me again, who's going to take care of everything I need to take care of. And it was a downward spiral. But it was understanding my clarity and my identity of truly who I was and who God had created me to be, is where that healing process and that grieving of, I need to grieve of the thing that the world says of being divorced and being a leader. You'll never be a leader in a church again. You'll never be an elder. You'll never be an influencer, because, these labels. And that's not what God says about us. God says that he hates divorce. Absolutely. He also says he hates sin. He hates affairs. He hates infidelity, all these things. That doesn't mean that people don't choose to do those. And guess what? We have to learn to walk in the fullness of who we are, no matter what other people's choices are in that. And so I went through that type of process of what is mine to own and what is other people's to be able to carry, because it's not for me to carry everything as I continue to move forward. And that really helped me be able to process how to be able to move forward and build on my identity.
Yes, absolutely. And you surrender everything to God, and once He takes over, the healing process. I mean, it's not immediate, it's not instant. You still grieve and cry and hate yourself, and talk all this negative talk about yourself. By the end of the day, if you look to Christ and say, you know what, you're my redeemer, you're my restorer, and he takes you through this. Yeah, and I'm glad you came out through this. Did you forgive? Have you forgiven?
Yeah, forgiveness, I would say, and this is some keys that I learned. Forgiveness was not a thing right away. And
Absolutely.
the Lord made that very clear, because people are like, oh, you just got to forgive, you got to pray for her, and the Lord said, Devin, there are people praying for her, because it
Mm,
was triggering for me. It was very hard for me. And
mm,
that forgiveness, there's grace, there's mercy in that. Does the word say we should forgive? Yes. But the word does not say that we need to forget, does not need to do any of that stuff. But if we can eventually work towards that process of continuing, and for me, it was continuing laying her down at the feet of Jesus. But when I got frustrated, when she showed up at the house, when she would call, when she would text, I would run back up to the foot of the cross and I would grab her again. Say, I can do this by myself. And I get frustrated. And that was a key thing to realize that, okay, yep, all right. I can't control myself, Lord. I'm weak. I'm weak. I need you.
I understand. I mean, this is somebody you've been emotionally attached to. It's not easy to just let go and be like as a stranger. And when somebody close to us hurts us, it's worse than it's different from when a stranger hurts us. You could just brush it off and say, I'm out of here. But this is different. This pain is raw and it's real. It takes the grace of God to get you out of this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um Secondly, I have um, um I know somebody who went through a situation like this, and this gentleman absolutely does not. He calls all women the S word. He thinks they are. And I look at him and the way he talks. I'm like, this one, is he going to get into a relationship? He has not healed. He has not, but he hopes to one day get into a relationship. I'm like, oh my God, whoever gets into a relationship with this one is in trouble, because he's going to carry all his pain from this person who hurt him to the next person. So what would you say to such a person? And what would do you think men respond differently to infidelity as opposed to women? Is there an ego issue? So, oh, how dare she? Things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a difference. We can go on generalities of men and women. Women tend to be more emotionally attached, tend to do that, and men tend to be more physical and more, like you said, egotistical when it comes to these things. So I feel like for women, it is finding that emotional healing, and what that looks like is, women talk
Yes,
better, they
we
share
talk.
emotions better. And men, it's just like we've been told forever, shut it down, push it down, get rid of it, like just be
Be
done,
man
like move
about it.
on. Yeah, man up, man up. And I'm going to tell you, that is the worst thing that you can do, because that's exactly what happened to this guy that you were talking about. He shoved his feelings down. And so a lot of guys, they carry that heaviness, and that's why you see the narcissistic tendencies. That's where you see the abuse. And it's so important that as men, we have to learn how to work together with other people to help us be able to label the emotions that maybe we don't know that we have. And that was one of the biggest healing things for me, was having people say, okay, what are you feeling right now? And just sit in that for a moment. That's not comfortable. I don't like that. But that was the healing part of, especially as guys, it's okay to cry. It's healthy to cry. It's a good release from your body to be able to do that. And so, yeah, and then it's just getting rid of that identity
Mm,
that the world's putting on you, that other guys are putting on you, that you're putting on yourself, and shoving that out. Because for guys, it's a lot about the image that we carry, and then it comes to not believing in ourselves and having that, I guess I would say, self disrespect.
mm,
We're not worthy. That unworthiness about us. Are we ever going to find anybody? Are we worth another relationship? And how are we going to? And then the insecurities that come along with it. It's hard enough to talk to a girl. Not yet if you have insecurities of somebody who's cheated on you before. Now you got to throw that out there, and it's a mess.
and she becomes a victim, like, oh my God, she will suffer. And that happens a lot, which is terrible. You find these innocent people have gotten into these relationships with somebody who hasn't healed, and they suffer. And, they also blame themselves at the end of the day, and yet maybe the other party hasn't healed. So would you advise people to jump right into relationships, or say, oh, please wait, just give it time? What do you think?
Yeah, my biggest thing when I advise people that are getting out of a relationship is you have got to spend that time focusing on yourself, because like you said, you're going to bring that damage right into the next relationship, and it's going to be terrible. And if you do jump into another relationship, and it may not show up right away, but it will eventually, as the trigger points get pointed out and things like that, it will show yourself. And I dated a girl about 3 years afterwards, and this is one thing that completely shifted, because I thought I was healed, I was good, and she's like, Devin, how can I love you if you don't love yourself enough to know where you're going? If you don't really know who you are, how can you expect me to love you? And I was just like, wow. Like, I thought I knew where I was going. I thought I knew what God was doing in my life, but I really didn't have that sense of of hope. I didn't have that hope anymore. I didn't know what the future held. I was just kind of waiting. And
Mm,
when she called that out, I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. If I don't know my own identity, how can I expect somebody else to love the identity that I don't know? And
mm,
that's key. If you don't know who you are or what you're doing, if you're not the man of God or the woman of God that you're called to be, if you're not already acting as that husband or wife, you shouldn't be getting into a relationship in the first place.
absolutely. Oh, thank you, Devin. Thank you, Devin, for those words of wisdom. Um, Yeah, so I would also like to ask about, you talked about adopted children,
Mhm.
and how one of your kids was giving you so much trouble, and it had to involve the police.
Mhm.
Um, Not many people adopt children out there. It takes a heart of gold to really
Mhm.
adapt. And children, generally children come with their own issues. They don't come with a manual, but they come with, depending with different issues. Then you add in that set of the adopted child. They come with some of them come with abandonment, some with issues. Could you speak to that situation? Could you speak to your situation and tell us what happened? And yeah,
Yeah,
going
so
forward.
when it comes to understanding, especially adopted children, but even your own biological children, it comes to a point to where we have to recognize that we need to love other people the way that God, our Father, loves us. And that took a whole paradigm shift, as I have only have adopted children. They have different backgrounds, and realizing that the things that I had experienced growing up, the spankings and the yelling and the things like that, for these children, for my children, that was very re-traumatizing for them.
Mm,
And it would cause them to act up even more. And that's a huge thing that you have to recognize, is what individual traits or characteristics do your kids have that you need to adapt the love of the Father to.
mm,
And for me, it was understanding that I didn't see, yes, I saw their behaviors, and I saw their struggles that they had been through, the traumas, the abuse that they had been through, the neglect that they had been through, but I saw them as who they were. And I saw them as true gold, as sons and daughters of the living God. And that is the one thing that pulled me through everything that I went through, was seeing that it is my job as a father to raise them in the ways of the Lord, train them up in the ways of the Lord, and they will go on the way, and the Lord will bring them up. And so I just have to step into my role and understand that, okay, God, thank you for giving me the honor and the privilege to raise these children here on earth. They're still yours. And one of the things that the Lord told me right at the divorce, I was walking down the steps and I dropped crying. And the Lord said, Devin, I love your children more than you do. And I know that doesn't make sense to you. I know you can't comprehend that, but you have to trust me. And so that is just such a huge thing to recognize, that as we're raising these kids, as we're pouring into them, that my identity as a father is not based on their behaviors or how they are when they grow up. It's the ways that I raise them, and my ultimate judge is the Father when I get to heaven, saying, well done, you raised your children, compared to what everybody else looks like when they see, my kids acting like a fool all the time. Hey, you know what? It is what it is, and they're in the Father's hands. That's the best I can do.
Yes, absolutely. It takes, it's the Father's love. We should love like the way Christ loved us, like the way Christ loved the church. And regardless of where these children come from, we're all children of God. And we need to pour out that love, especially to those who are hurting. We shouldn't just pour out to those who are in a great or perfect situation, but bring them in, reel them in, and love them, and show them Christ's love.
Yeah.
So, David, you're amazing. Honestly, you're really, really amazing. Your story is amazing. Your testimony reminds me of Paul in the Bible, what he went through. It's when I read about your testimony, when you speak about it with an open heart, with no pretense, it's I'm taken back to Paul. Paul, he was imprisoned, he was flogged, he was even bitten by a snake. But then at the end of the day, and I read that snake story, and he just shook it off. And these guys are waiting for him to drop dead. So it reminded me of your story. Like all these, you're a leader, and you're going through all these trials and tribulations, and people are waiting for you to. But you rise up, you triumph, you come out of these trials better and better equipped to serve people. And the Lord puts us here to serve. It's not just for our own happiness, like Paul in the Bible. We suffer, but he yearned for the church. He wrote all these letters to the church. I mean, I wouldn't be in prison writing letters to churches. I would be writing to a lawyer to get me out of there. So your story reminds me of Paul in the Bible, and I really have no words. It's just profound. It's I thank God that He's using you to change lives and to lift up leaders, to raise up leaders, and to help people to be better people. Thank you, Devin. Thank you for your time, and may the Lord bless you. Any words, any closing words you'd like to share with anyone out there?
Yeah, I would just love to encourage each and every one of you, that each of you has a story to share. Each of you has a voice that needs to be heard. And for people that have come against you, people that have abandoned you or neglected you, I just want to apologize for that, and say that, I'm sorry that the church has maybe hurt you, or people have hurt you, have come against you. But one thing that Jesus did is Jesus came and he showed doubting Thomas the holes that were in his hands. Many people will say, do not look back. Don't leave the past. But Jesus said, turn your wounds into scars and show everybody what I have done. And when he showed Thomas and the people of the scars that were on him, each of us has got scars, has got wounds, has got things from our past that we can share to entrust other people. And my mantra is that I love people, I meet them where they're at, but I don't leave them there. So if you see somebody that's struggling through something that you're going through, or you've been through, meet them where they're at, love them, and continue to bring them forward each and every day.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you for your words. Thank you. Truly, love leads the way. And that's why we're here, to love, above all. Thank you, Devin. Thank you for your time.
You're
All right.
welcome.
And would you like to share your address, your info?
Yeah, the best way to find me is either on Facebook, Devin Schubert, or at my website is devinschubert.com.
Yes, and I'll share the link as well. Thank you,
Sounds
Devin.
great. Thank you.
Okay. God bless. Bye.